Leaders who mentored me because they saw that I brought something to the table. They saw that I was a contributor. They saw that I could contribute more and wanted to support me doing that. Those kinds of leaders, have a special place for me
Yeah.
because it wasn't some attempt at anything nefarious. It wasn't, an attempt to try and take advantage of the situation. I was felt like I was truly a part of the team because I had leaders who had no problem mistreating me. And then, that gave my fellow, brethren at arms the go ahead that they felt that they could do the same. And, I had leaders who saw that, who thought that, she doesn't deserve to be here or she hasn't earned the right to be here. Jump in and remind them, hey, this is a team.
Yeah.
If you got a teammate that's not doing what they need to do, your job isn't to jump on them and kick them down. Your job is to let them know where they're going wrong and tell them what they need to do to get there. So be a part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Open Discussion Podcast. I have a special guest today. I keep saying to myself, I got to rephrase my intro because special guest is an understatement when it comes to you. Colonel Retired Rice. That sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does because it's real, and it's real.
Colonel Retired Rice. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for being here. Over 2 decades of outstanding military service. From New York, I'm from Jersey, so we got to talk about it here a little bit more. Jersey and New York folks almost the same, but just an outstanding person. As I said, over 2 decades of military service, served in every key leader position from a company up to a 4-star level. Some of his assignment includes 3 rotations to the Pentagon. I interviewed for a job at the Pentagon at 2-star level. They didn't pick me, so they picked you. So that says a lot, right? Work on the Joint Staff at U.S. Army North Com, where she served as a commander, and of course, as J1. Served as the 1st Infantry Division over at Fort Riley, Junction City. G1 for the division, and of course, one of her best assignment, in my opinion, U.S. Army Europe and Africa, J1 up there, G1 as well. And then most recently served as the G1 at the Army Material Command, 4-star level. A very passionate individual when it comes to self-improvement, self-investment, financial literacy. We're gonna discuss all those key elements here, but just an outstanding leader. Sometimes some majors and sharing lists we kind of gossip. First, when I first met you, alongside a peer of mine, we said to ourselves, yes, she's gonna be a general officer. It was just said that way. I guess it's just something we saw. But I appreciate you. Thanks again for your service. And how you doing today?
Thank you. I am doing fabulous. So glad that the sun is back out here again in Huntsville, which is where I
Oh,
currently am. And yeah, just loving life. Thinking about all the good things still yet to come.
absolutely. A New York girl, U.S. Army. I mean, you could have done whatever you wanted to do. You would have been an astronaut, a doctor, a lawyer, but you chose to serve your country. So just want to get right into it, right? Because service to all of us is a little bit different. We all have a different reason and just what contributed to us saying, I want to serve my country, right? Because very small amount of the U.S. population serving the U.S. military. And I just want to thank you for your long-term and outstanding service. But living in New York, living the life, enjoying life up there, you decided to join the military. What was the contributing factor behind that?
And we love to talk about how there's always, a different story. I served a little time in USAREC, so United States Army Recruiting Command. And, I got to share my story as many of those individuals got to share their story with why is it, that we joined.
Yeah.
For me, like many, I joined for education purposes and really to finance that education, for a lot of individuals, especially trying to get into college, and then, maybe serve a short period of time in the military before going into, a full-term civilian career. And as you mentioned, living in New York City, it could have been anything, doing anything. And what I had wanted to do was work on Wall Street. My
Mm.
plan was to take over Wall Street. And to do that, though, I needed to get through college and trying to figure out a way, how do I fund that? It became that avenue for me. I had to pay my way through college. My mom was a single parent, 3 kids. And for her, it was, hey, my job was to get you through high school. My job is to get all you kids through high school. And then after that, you guys are going to have to make your own way. And so for me, that's what I did. And going to college was that first step following high school. And like I said, being able to pay for it was a big focus. And so though I had scholarships and other financial aid, it wasn't enough. And
Yeah.
so joining the military was the way really to get the rest of the way there.
That's amazing, right? Because you had an option, like a lot of us who joined the military to join the different branches that was prior to the Space Force. You have the Army, Navy, Marine, Coast Guard. But why the Army though? Did you had any kind of analysis? Did you conduct any kind of homework and assessments? I do believe the Army is the best route for me. Why was the Army?
So a lot of times you'll hear, people join the service because there is a family connection, there's some kind of connection there.
Yeah.
For me, it was my uncle. So my mom is among 16 kids, and her youngest brother, who was also her youngest sibling, that was how he got out into the world. He graduated from high school and joined the
Mhm.
army. And I happened to actually be there the day when the Greyhound bus, back in the day when Greyhound
Mm,
was big,
great, huh? Yeah.
picked him up and off he went, And so by the time I got to high school and I was getting ready to graduate, he had served, several years in the army,
Yeah.
and he had made the recommendation to me that, you are a really bossy kid and the military can do you well.
Man,
And so there was. I mean, I was sold after that. So
that's amazing. So you served over 2 decades, right? Different assignment, different duty stations, different responsibility, came across different people, different background. That's what I love about the military because it's like a gumbo, right? Folks from all over the globe, really, if you think about it, that serve within the military. But everybody's different. That's what make the army so with the service so unique because of its diversity in terms of people, but not just people, but diversity in terms of mindset, you know. So as you navigate through, your first stage of the army, from that lieutenant up to a field grade officer, what were some things that you came across that you experienced that had a profound impact on you? Because from that stage, from a lieutenant up to field grade officer, you're really trying to figure out the military, the army. Really, you have to key leader position as an XO, a commander. But once you become a field grade officer, things should change. But what were some things that you came across, you experienced, that had a profound impact on you, negative or positive? If you want to share with us.
sure. And man, I'm happy to have that question because really I'm gonna go all the way back to the beginning. So I actually
Okay.
joined, as I mentioned earlier, about education funding,
Yeah.
and I actually joined the National Guard. And
Okay.
so I actually started in 1993. So more than 30 years I've served in some capacity. And as an enlisted soldier, the thing that stuck with me was I had a platoon sergeant, and this guy cared. I mean, we'd have formation, and if somebody was missing, he'd want to know where they were. Hey, did somebody
Man.
call? Does anybody know where he or she is? When was the last time someone spoke to them?
Mm.
We had birthdays. He made sure that we acknowledged people's birthdays, anniversaries. He handed out cards at Christmas. I
What?
mean, yes. So it was my enlisted time. One of the first big takeaways that I had
Yeah.
was I want to be like that guy. I want to be like my platoon sergeant because this guy really cared. And whether he
Man.
did or not, I don't know, but he did to me. And so that was kind of the first great leadership example that I had in my early career, and why I have so much respect for the enlisted, especially the senior NCOs and those who just don't speak. You need to
Yeah.
know your soldiers, but who actually did. And so I took that with me when I became an officer, that you don't have to just be an NCO to care about your soldiers.
Yeah.
If you are a leader, that just goes hand in hand. It's to care about your soldiers and get to know who they are, as much as you can, because you would be amazed at how it can change, your soldiers when your leaders demonstrate even just a little bit of true, authentic care about you. So for me, that was probably one of the biggest things. And it just really hurts when you met leaders or you had leaders who demonstrated that they only cared about you as far as the mission getting done. And it all hinged on that. So it was just so conditional. It was, as long as you got the job done, you were great. And the minute you did something that
Mm.
they didn't like, then you no longer measured up. You 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 didn't matter anymore. And so to me, that was something that just has profoundly affected me and continues to do so today. And so gravitating to those leaders who demonstrated, their authentic care towards service members, myself, those were leaders that I continue to gravitate to this day and continue to follow because I know it wasn't just a fluke. It wasn't just while they were in the
Yeah.
military. It was when people were watching and when people weren't watching. So,
That's amazing, right? Yeah, you just talk about just the platoon sergeant had an impact on you, but from a leadership standpoint, I was very lucky to have some outstanding platoon sergeants. I'm not gonna lie to you. What I mean, I had a guy who used to invite me over to his house on the weekend and train me at
mhm,
his house. He used to
wow.
give me homework assignments while my friends are going to the club and doing whatever. I'm over there because initially I was kind of pissed off about it. Like, what, why me? But I didn't know he was investing in because he saw something in me I didn't see in myself. So as we discussed the piece of leadership, you have really the opportunity to serve in different key leadership positions. And sometimes people use the term leadership in a whole different context, right? The Army has its own definition, but I believe personally, leadership is about service to others. You have to service people. It's all about you servicing others. How was it for you in those key leadership positions, as a platoon leader, platoon company commander, up to battalion, and whatever the case may be? Because you have people you were entrusted into. How was that for you? And when we speak in terms of leadership, I mean, what are some things or what are some lessons you have learned as a leader?
Well, one, that you'll take away with you no matter what in life is it can be a thankless job. You
Yeah,
can do so much for an individual, for an organization, and sometimes they won't recognize that. Individuals may not be able to recognize that. And the thing is, that is okay. Cause that's not why you're doing it. You're not doing it because you want to be appreciated back.
yeah,
You're doing it like you stated because sometimes you see something in others that they don't see in themselves. And giving people the encouragement, instilling in them the confidence that they could do whatever it is that they put their mind to be a part of that has been, at every leadership point in my career that I have focused on is to try and contribute something to help that individual get to where they're trying to be in life. Sometimes folks don't even realize what they want. They're kind of just
yeah,
there. They're
yeah,
waiting for it, to kind of hit them on the head and say, that's why I'm here.
yeah,
That's why. And sometimes it takes, an external person showing you can be what it is that you're trying to be. Or you may not even know yet, but here's where you're walking towards. And so being a leader and having the opportunity to be able to help individuals to get there is, has been one of my greatest joys. And as an HR, AG, a G1, an S1, working in the J1, being a commander, an XO, that is something that I've taken with me in every one of those roles. Whether I was deployed, whether I was just overseas doing an overseas tour, whether I was at home station, working in recruiting, I was in a reserve unit, and so that was hard
different ball game, right?
to be one of the few active duty people amongst, a whole lot of reservists and M-Day, which are, kind of the weekend warriors, as people like to refer to them, which is not the best term.
Yeah,
But the fact that having an opportunity to help people to become their best selves and, when you're in that position, sometimes that's what those folks are looking for from you. I think that's why people may be disappointed in their leadership is because they have this idea that their leadership is trying to help them to get them to where they should be. And some folks leave out that they ignore that part of, of their leadership responsibilities. Oftentimes the more senior we get, sometimes the more far away we get from the soldier and we stop doing that and we start believing that it's somebody else's job to do, you know. You stated obviously up front, I'm a colonel, retired. And people think as colonels, oh, you guys don't need any mentorship. You guys have made it. You've made it. And the thing is in the end, we're still people too,
yeah.
and we want to be recognized for what we've done. I mean, again, it's not all day, every day that it has to be, every little thing that you do, because yeah, there are a lot of things that we do that it's part of your job and, you're being paid or, you're being given the tools or what have you to be successful. But just having a leader to dedicate some of their time to you, even at that point in your career, is still huge, and it means so much. And it's just that a lot of people take that for granted. And so you have this standoff between leaders and their service members, their soldiers, because they think you're the battalion commander, your life is perfect. You have
Yeah.
everything. You're the S1, you're the brigade S1 or what have you, and they think that you've made it and that you're just so self-sufficient and that you don't have to work. And it's really hard. It's really hard. And so just having that little bit of encouragement that we want to give to our soldiers, we want that too. And I see nothing wrong with that at all. I refuse to believe that every GO out there is walking around believing that they don't need, somebody
We all
to
need
let them
somebody.
know that their work is appreciated, that their efforts are appreciated, that we see what you are doing, and we want to thank you for that.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it, right? Because you serve in a very unique situation because you had an opportunity to work alongside general officers on a daily basis. Really, you advise, you assess, observed. That's my next question, really, because we all have different leadership style, right? And I do believe this within our essence as a leader, there's certain attributes, certain characteristics you must have to be a very effective leader. Really, there's so many different ones out there. But from all the position you serve in, the things you observing both not just military leaders, but also civilian leaders within the Pentagon, we're going to discuss that here moving forward. What are some characteristics or just some attribute that you believe every good leader should have?
Humility. I'm going to start right there
Why though? Because folks always say that, and I do believe it is critical, it is important, right? But why is this? Should we push the issue of you being humble, really, as a leader?
because it says you're just not in it for yourself. You know, when people believe that you're going to have my back, that you're going to be there for me when I need you, folks are going to row harder. They're going to give their all. They're going to keep you and your mission and your success front of mind. And so when you can see that, and there's that sense of appreciation of
Yeah,
what it is that you do, that it is a team, that it's not just, a phrase, that there's no I in team,
yeah,
but there is a me in team. And so people want to make sure they want to see that you're just not in it for me. They want to see that you're in it for the mission, that you're in it for the people who are here trying to help you accomplish your mission because you're trying to help your boss accomplish their mission. So, leaders who have demonstrated that when they've made a mistake, they've owned it. They don't dwell on it and no one's asking them to do that. But
yeah,
having that sense of, you know what, you made a mistake, private, you made a mistake, NCO, you made a mistake, officer. And I mean legit mistakes, not the some of those things out there I'm referring to. But when you've made legit mistakes that you've been allowed to recover from them. And to me, when you have leaders who've allowed you to do that, a lot of times those folks, I mean, they have shined, they have soared. People have done things that they couldn't believe that they could do, but somebody showed them that, you bleed like I bleed. You hurt like I hurt. You want to be successful like I want to be successful. And so for me, that was first and foremost mentorship, and not because, right, as a woman, as a minority, there aren't a whole lot of people that looked like me
yeah,
growing up, and leaders who mentored me because they saw that I brought something to the table. They saw that I was a contributor. They saw that I could contribute more and wanted to support me doing that. Those kinds of leaders, have a special place for me
yeah,
because it wasn't some attempt at anything nefarious. It wasn't, an attempt to try and, take advantage of the situation. I was felt like I was truly a part of the team because I had leaders who had no problem mistreating me. And then, that gave my fellow, brethren at arms the go ahead that they felt that they could do the same. And, I had leaders who saw that, who thought that, she doesn't deserve to be here or she hasn't earned the right to be here. Jump in and remind them, hey, this is a team.
yeah,
If you got a teammate that's not doing what they need to do, your job isn't to jump on them and kick them down. Your job is to let them know where they're going wrong and tell them what they need to do to get there. So be a part of the solution and not part of the problem. And so that's real teamwork there. That is recognizing what everyone brings to the table and then trying to get those folks to use those skills, to use their strengths to improve the organization and getting the mission done. So those are the kinds of things that I would say traits in those leaders that for me, like I said, hold a special place and allow me to feel blessed to have worked with those individuals and to work with individuals who've had leaders like that in their own careers.
That's amazing. You just said something that I think would stimulate just another conversation because we have good leaders and we have bad leaders. We also have experienced those atmosphere. So I'm pretty huge on organization culture, organizational climate. How did you navigate that? In terms of you find yourself in a position, not just because based on your competency, it's just because it's a whole different situation, right? Because as I stated earlier, the military is a huge organization, folks from all walks of life with their own belief system, their own sets of value comes in the organization. But how did you really effectively navigate a situation where you know that the leader or some leaders for which you were supposed to look at you differently or treat you differently or create a condition, and maybe direct or indirect, to make sure that you're not successful? How were you able to really navigate that situation?
Well, first and foremost, my faith in God. I mean, every day I wake up, I am grateful for the opportunity for another chance
Yeah.
to, be outstanding, to do my very best. And, my faith that I'm going to leave it in his hands and I'm going to know what I'm supposed to do, right? I'm going to continue being the person that I strive to be, regardless of those things. Because what you don't want, at least for me anyway, is you don't want to be successful, but then you can't look yourself in the mirror
Yeah.
thinking about how you got there, the lengths that you went through to get there. And so that for me was huge. A lot of verses out there, people take with them, things like, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth kind of thing. It wasn't so much that I turned the other cheek every time because, you mentioned at the top of this, I'm from New York City. So, I'm a get a
Yeah.
few things in.
In New York, it's like you got to keep an eye on
I'm gonna get a few in,
them.
but, the whole vengeance is mine kind of
Yeah.
thing. I tried to stay away from that. And I used the operative word of try because there were definitely, just a few times where, it felt like I had to do that. That was the only way to move forward was to show this person, to show this individual or these individuals, you're not going to get the better of me. And so those kinds of things, the idea that I'm never going to let them see me sweat was, another phrase that I kept because you can see some of that. You can see in the actions that people are taking that they're not there for you. And so rather than walk into that trap and give them what they want, I had to be strategic. If I was going to have some kind of downfall, I wanted it to be because of something I did,
You
you
did.
know,
Yeah.
not because I'm out there trying to beat somebody else, and, you get caught up in your own game, you get caught in your own trap. And so I saw that often. I mean, you could see the gamesmanship. It's like being in a sporting event. You would see individuals, you can tell they're trying to get somewhere, that whole jockeying for position or what have you, because that is real. There's an organization too big that you can't
Yeah.
expect that kind of competition to happen. And sadly, I just avoided that kind of stuff because it never ended well. And so, for me, I wanted my work to show for itself. It wasn't to be about, let me show them how smart I am or what I
Yeah.
know. And, because I tried to do that sometimes too. And that just made it worse. And so the idea of showing them you're a teammate,
Yeah.
showing them you came here to accomplish a mission and that, my accomplishments as a teammate matters. And, if they can't see it, that's their loss, not yours, because what we do affects other individuals. So, kind of taking myself out of the equation as much as possible is what I tried to do because I just felt that I've got to be a threat of some kind. Why else, do these people find themselves allowing me to take up so much rent in their heads? Well, so yeah,
Man, that's a good way to kind of frame it, right? I think we both can agree that I would say about 99.9% of leaders in the military are good people. They mean
yeah,
as well.
yes,
It just that little percentage who, trying to do something a little bit different and because they believe that, the military talk about your position, right? The ONC or creed was not, oh, I will not use my grade or position to obtain pleasure, profit, personal safety. Some folks use that to somewhat suppress others. What would be, I know you just talk about it, but just to bring it back here, what would be one advice or recommendation that you would present to someone who found themselves in the position of I don't want to say a command, but just a climate to where it's somewhat difficult to navigate in terms of he or she being mistreated, because most of the time it's somewhat indirectly. It may not be directly because we have policy in place that governs that.
Mhm.
Well, from your experience and what you just talk about, if you was to give a young officer, a young enlisted personnel out there, no matter who they are, recommendation on how to navigate those space, what do you think would it be?
Focus on what you can control. You can't control how other people feel about you.
Yeah,
You can control how they're going to respond or react to you, but you can control how you respond and react to them. And the resources that you have, look for people who support you in the way you want to be supported and need to be supported. Look for those external teammates, those external resources to focus on, your family, your friends back at home, the friends you may have in the unit or in the new unit next to you, leaders you may have worked with previously, but that's what I recommend, and I recommend that now. I mean, I have mentees who find themselves in those positions, which is one of the reasons why mentoring is such a big deal for me.
yeah,
Is because I know that it still exists, that there are people out there who don't want the best for you, but to help you find those who do. Remind them that there are people out there who want that for you. And those are the people you want to gravitate towards. And like I said, control what you can. Use the regulations that support what it is that you're trying to do. Use the policies. Find the individuals whose roles, that are to be there to support you and to help you. And I know sometimes those are the people
yeah,
who are the problem.
yeah.
So you try to find the resource in your neighboring unit, reach out to Department of the Army where that may be a path or an avenue. Talking to your branch manager, if you're an officer on the enlisted side as well. So just trying to control things and factors that you can control, right? Focus on your job, making sure you're doing things that you are supposed to be doing. Don't allow the things that you're supposed to be doing to become, your own downfall.
Yeah.
You gotta, because it's amazing the things that people will use to bring you down. We talk about height and weight, right? Listen, you can be the best at whatever, but don't let them use, your height and weight against
Yeah,
you.
against you.
Don't let, failing your AFT, APFT,
Yeah,
whatever the letters are these days.
changed so
But
many times.
right? Can't even keep up. But nevertheless, it's those things, right? You go to the range, you do the things that you can control and you do those things well and you focus on those things, documenting that you're doing those things, your
Yeah.
accomplishments, you know, people want to say good things about you, ask them to write it. Hey, can you send that to me in an email? Hey, can you
Mm,
write a letter for me? Can you put in, do you think what I did was award worthy? I'm just asking, would you be willing to submit that, as an achievement award, some kind of accomplishment, thank you note, a 1-star note, a colonel's note, a commander's note. So just things like that to help you stay focused again on the things that you can control, the areas of your life that you can control.
that's amazing because when you just talk about those recognition, right? We don't usually talk about it because if you have done something like for you, your department, your section, your team done a great job when it comes to the J1, the J1, whatever the case may be, and what I've usually heard in the past, oh, they're just doing their job. Yeah, well, of course we got it, but they're doing more than their job. So that thanks for really putting that into perspective. You've had the opportunity to serve in different positions. I'm a little bit jealous because one of my dream job was to serve in the Pentagon, and so I talked about earlier. I did a nominative interview to serve work at the Pentagon, but I was not selected. And another guy was selected who was very, very, very capable of doing the job, an outstanding leader, and whoever like the general officer have gone on to do some great things. But outstanding leader as well. It just how sometimes things happen. I'm not upset about it, but I really want to love to work at the Pentagon. You had 3 rotation up there. You want to talk about briefly what is it like working in the Pentagon? But then I know you was involved in some very, very transformative initiative that is impacting the Army today. If you want to discuss that, that would be real.
Okay, yes. So I did do 3 tours at the Pentagon. Each time I was there about 2 years. Yeah, so my first tour there, I got there as a major, um, and I will have to say that my previous assignment I was in, 2nd Stryker Brigade at 25th ID, and coming out of that
Hawaii.
assignment
You
yeah,
in
coming
Hawaii too? And you have other good assignment. Everybody want to go. Yeah, you come. You showed up.
twice, I did 2 tours there, yeah. So, my 2nd tour there, I was the Brigadist 1 for the 2nd Stryker Brigade, and as one of, the first, if not first, Stryker Brigade combat team, female, AG officer in that billet, it was huge. And I got to experience so much in that assignment because not only was I there in Hawaii in the job, but we deployed. So, went to Iraq, part of the surge. And that just gave me so much opportunity, to do my critical tasks, your wartime functions, some of them not pretty, as being
Yeah.
in war. And so I was lucky enough to be able to translate that to my assignment following to the Pentagon. And in that tour, administration at that time was looking to expand the roles of across the services and, infantry, special forces, ranger school, those kinds of things. The administration at the time was looking to open. And at the time, many thought that that had been a congressional requirement to allow women to do that. So this thing called the combat no, the direct ground combat assignment rule is what it was called. And it basically stated that women could not serve in infantry units and positions below the brigade.
Mm,
And so because of that, we didn't have, female infantrymen and, field artillery and certain, very limited aspects and special forces, et cetera, et cetera. Ranger school was why women could not go to ranger school at the time and some of these other schools because you couldn't serve in those roles except for at the company or battalion troop level. And so that's what prevented women's assignment there. Well, Iraq, needless to say, we
yeah,
had to do what we had to do to be
absolutely.
successful. And the idea of, hey, well, you're female, so you can't be assigned here. Yeah,
The enemy don't care what your gender is.
that's right. Bullets didn't care, so things like that was happening at that time. And, there were other programs that was specific, female engagement teams. So, being in the Middle East, gender
Yeah,
plays a very big role.
yeah,
And, the enemy used that to their advantage, where, they knew that men touching women and being in spaces that were designated only for women, they used that to their advantage. And so, we didn't have people who were on the ground who could move in those spaces. And so you had things like, again, the female engagement teams. And it became a matter of we had been in those spaces. We had military police officers, women,
yeah.
they're out here on the ground. They are policing,
Mhm.
right here at the lowest levels. Medics, there was no separation. It was their
Yeah,
duty, it was their job, and nobody cared that, oh, well, you can't be here to do your job because, there's no brigade or above here kind of thing. So seeing that and having to make decisions that no longer made sense, in the current situation to prove that they were no longer relevant. So when I got to the Pentagon, I became eventually the Army's point person for how do we integrate women into these additional billets. We had female combat engineers, but they didn't really serve combat engineer
yeah.
positions,
Positions, yeah,
so we had women going to sniper or sapper school
schools.
and doing all of these things, but could not use those skills simply because we were women. And at that time, the world was clearly seeing that. We were seeing men and women die on the battlefield. And
Yes,
so the idea that we could be safe, we could put us somewhere just was not a reality anymore. And so, like I said, I was able to use my experience being in the Stryker Brigade. We were 5,000 strong. And the number of females, it was like a couple dozen of us, but that didn't matter because we had a job to do. We had a job and
do.
we had to get it done. And we did. We did it with honor. They did it with honor. And so when it came time to try and figure out how do we do that, initially the conversation was all women can't, women can't, women can't. And eventually, after enough statistics, after enough stories, just after enough, the tide turned and it eventually became, why can't they do it? You
Yeah.
know? And so I had the pleasure of being able to be there to help the many men that were a part of that program to understand I can do it. Can you ask me why I can't instead of
I can't do it.
talking around me like I'm not even here in the room? And so we see where we are now. The program eventually became what's known as we started off as a pilot, actually, in the Army before the other services did it. And we decided to have leaders, so, lieutenants, captains in career fields that were already open to women. So lawyers and personnelists, logisticians, drivers, so in positions where we already existed.
Yeah.
And that's where we went and to allow them to see women leadership, to be able to get involved with things because we were leaders and we had experience. And so by the time, the basic training began and the commissioning changed to allow women into infantry and armor and et cetera, there was experience there. And
Yeah.
so the program, like I said, for the Army eventually became Leaders First, where, again, we put leaders in, like I said, so the pilot was expanded and it became policy. And so, but we had to craft that very well so that it wasn't one of these things that we just, yeah, they're there and now they're gone. Oh yeah, that was great. We tested it. It didn't work or, and now we're doing something else. And so being the lead on that was just huge. And so, I had the opportunity to speak to other countries' armies about it, in Japan and Canada and Australia. So it was a really an amazing assignment. And I was a major. I was not the kind of thing a lot of majors get to do
Yeah.
with military. So that was my first tour. My second tour, I came back. I worked in DMPM, where we do a lot of the policy for personnel. So the Directorate for Military Personnel Management, commissioning. We set the numbers for recruiting for the Army. So in that position, I worked enlisted personnel, and that's when we started with the courses for our master sergeants, right? So there hadn't been any master sergeant courses. It was, you went from an
Master leader
E7,
course.
yes, and the next thing you know, you were a sergeant major. It was like, okay, what do we do in the middle with these guys? There's no school there. And so that became one of the big things that occurred. The new APFT, where we designed the grading scale for that, which again has morphed, multiple times since then. So that's what I got to do in my second tour was leader development on the enlisted side. Separations, we worked when, so QMP, that
Hmm.
program, executive management program, where, we did the boards, we set the boards to determine soldiers on the enlisted side needed to remain or, the Army needed to let them go.
Hmm.
Because their conduct was no longer in line with Army values,
Yeah.
etc. And then in my last tour at the Pentagon, I actually worked at OSD, so Office of the Secretary of Defense, and getting the opportunity to see how not just the Army but the Department of Defense, how
Fence.
it operated, was just incredible. And so to see a lot of what's playing out politically today, I have such an appreciation for it. And, so my boss at the time, he himself was a former congressman. And so having the opportunity to learn from him, how some of that work, when you hear things and how they impact us as
Yeah.
military, it kind of goes over our heads because we're really not, meant to really be in the politics of
Yeah.
things because, we're apolitical. So, but to understand, what that truly means by understanding what politics were was just phenomenal. And so when I worked there, having the opportunity to be there to help with information that allow the Secretary of Defense to make recommendations to the president, was just incredible. You don't think that you would ever have such an opportunity because it's not even something you can conceive of,
Yeah.
being out in the field. And, the interesting thing about that job was, again, one of the first females, to be working in that position. I was the senior military assistant to the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. And so, being involved with what was going on in Ukraine and understanding our role in that. understanding our role with, what was going on when the administration changed the abortion policies and pushing that back to the states. How did that impact us, in the military? So just seeing how things, again, we may find out there, it's like, oh, we're in the military, that's
Yeah,
what's going on, out there. But that impacts us, how
absolutely.
it shapes how we interact when we are out there in those states, how as now citizens in those states, how we're going to be treated when we're in those states where there's different rules for different things. And so being able to advise from a military point of view and understanding, helping my civilian leaders understand this is how that could impact the military. And that was just, like I said, that was just incredible. And so being able to travel the country and to the globe, seeing how, what our ambassadorship is out there, to see and understand how, we are seen and viewed by other armies, other governments around the globe was huge. And I mean, it wasn't always pretty,
Yeah.
but it was just so eye-opening. And it just gave me a greater sense of appreciation to be someone serving in uniform. So,
I think
but yeah.
that's amazing, right? The exposure you had really, I wish, a lot of an officer and both NCO or CNI commissioned officer can have the opportunity to work in those areas. I mean, of course, it's not a huge. The Pentagon is huge, of course, but I mean, in terms of the level of position that is there for green suiters, but your experiences give you a complete different perspective on just how things work. Just observing that huge bureaucracy and see how things work there and how policies are made. You said something earlier about the initiative you worked on in terms of women in combat roles, whatever. I believe the same time you was in Iraq, I was in Iraq, I think about the same time because I was there '06 through '08 for that
Mhm.
15 months rotation. And what I
Correct.
can
Yep.
tell you, what I observed from, I was in Tikrit, what I observed for myself, I was a new platoon sergeant at the time.
Mhm.
We had a female engagement team with us. And it was not just about, searching or whatever the local women, but I had those women. One of them that I really admire. She did everything everybody else did within the platoon.
That's it.
For the matter of fact, she was the Degan cruiser weapon operator. She said, "I got it." I'm telling you, I mean, it was amazing. She carried her own rock. There was no, I mean, so we have seen since its inception within the military, women have played different role and critical role in different areas. So the whole idea, yeah. But she was outstanding. I want to transition into something you're very, very passionate about, right? The issue of self investment, and if you can just elaborate on that a little bit more, because I had another outstanding service members on here the last time, Crystal McFadden. She talked about financial literacy, investment to yourself, but some you really have been very, very, passionate about. If you can, what does that look to you in terms of self investment from a financial standpoint, both in uniform, outside uniform? You have a young, enlisted person out there or a young officer who's, working 9 to 5. You want to call it 9 to 5 in the military, right? But what brought about your interest in self investment? And what are some things you think, service members can do and veterans can do in terms of investing in themselves?
Wow, thanks. I appreciate that because, yeah, I'm a big fan of investing in oneself. Folks, when they hear that, probably all kinds of things may come to mind. It's like, I don't even know there's so many things, for some people because they're
Yeah.
looking for, can you be specific about investing in myself? Investing in yourself to me, for one, is paying yourself first, right? So you get paid right away. Savings should be first and foremost. And it is for me. It took me a good while to understand what that meant. Coming into the Army, I had all kinds of debt. Like I mentioned earlier, I had to put myself through school. And so I had to find all kinds of ways of doing that. And in doing so, I went into debt. You're coming out in the world, you're looking your first apartment, your first car, you're trying to get a wardrobe, you're just trying to do all these things. And a lot of times for some, that stuff is paid for on credit. So, I had credit card debt and it weighed me down. And a lot of it was because of ignorance
Yeah.
about money, personal finance, money growing up, probably like in many households, is a taboo thing. Your parents don't want you worrying about the finances. They want you to go off and, be well and think about all kinds of things like do well in school and your sports and things like that. And, they don't want to involve you with the money problems or troubles in your family. And sometimes part of that is them not knowing themselves
Yeah.
how to manage money or how to transfer that knowledge onto their own kids. So generational, debt, I guess, if you will, is because we haven't learned those things. So for me, personal finance is a personal endeavor, and I look for all kinds of ways to increase my knowledge financially speaking. I became most recently a certified financial education instructor because that's how much it means to me personally to understand personal finances, but to be able to go out there and share that
Yeah.
and educating others. I was working a podcast that, now that I'm fully retired, I can, dedicate more
Get
time
back
to.
into it. Absolutely.
Yes, and that podcast was a personal financial podcast. And it was, trying to share with individuals information to help empower them to
Yeah.
make better decisions financially, understanding, what, I'm being ripped off because of this, or recognizing, man, I'm sabotaging my financial self that will impact all kinds of other areas in my life. TSP, holy cow. So, when probably you, definitely me, when I came in the Army, TSP was not available to
Yeah.
soldiers. It was
Yeah.
it was available to government civilians, but it wasn't available to soldiers. And when that happened, that just opened up a whole new thing for me in, understanding what it was, because I realized, holy cow, dude, this is like a retirement account on top of
Yeah.
my retirement check. If I stay in the Army long enough to retire, I'm going to get in on that.
Yeah.
And, I became certified to be able to teach about the TSP to service members. And that was actually during my first tour to Hawaii. So, I was there twice. But anyway,
You ain't got to rub it in. I know you got all the best assignments over there.
yeah, so that became such a thing, and, I had newsletters. I read on the internet, as it became bigger and more popular and, more and more people had it. I'd go to library events where they would host small things, about setting budgets and setting financial goals. I did the things because I did not want to repeat the errors of my youth. I wanted to be able to live comfortably,
Yeah.
and not have to wait until I was old. I don't know why people think, when you get old, you get rich. Right? Like there's money
Yeah.
waiting for you. And that
Nope.
is not the case. And, and you had people who thought they needed to wait until they got out of the military and then they could really, do something financially speaking. And, that was just not the case for me. I started going to these investment seminars, trying to understand what mutual funds were, understanding what stocks were. I got books, the self-help books,
Yeah.
Susie Orman. I was religious. I'd be out running with my earbuds in, listening to a Susie Orman podcast. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't think anybody would believe me.
Self-education.
I'm out here running and I'm listening to Susie Orman, some fantastic music. I'd be on the stair stepper listening to Susie Orman, so just learning and that has paid off for me. I was able to purchase my first home in Hawaii, of all places. And, to be able to do that as a young captain, it was a huge investment and it has paid off. I've kept it since then. I bought the house back in early 2000s and here we are 20 plus years later. And, if I were to sell that place, that I absolutely wouldn't need to work again. You know what I'm saying? And so, but to make the sacrifices is the other thing, right? I bought one car, now two in the, number of years since I've been able to drive. I got my driver's license when I was 20. Because again,
You know,
grew up in New York.
you folks from New York don't ever have the driver's license
That's
anyway.
it. I know. That's it. It took me to 20. And the only reason why I got it was because when I was in college, my friends would let me borrow their car. I would
Yeah.
ask, hey, can you give me a ride to the grocery store or give me a ride to somewhere? And they would say, oh, just take my keys. And I said, well, if I could drive, I would have said, hey, can I borrow your car to go to
Yeah.
the grocery store? But that's not what I did. So anyway, but I have literally owned two cars since I've had my driver's license and that's been well over 30 years. So the first car, I kept it. I bought that car in the 90s. It was used already when I bought it and I kept it literally until the wheels fell off because a drunk driver struck my car and totaled it. The car was almost 20 years old at the time. And so I had to let it go because it was totaled out. And I didn't even buy a car after that for the next 2 years. I took public transportation. I rented a vehicle when I needed to have a car, if I didn't have someone to borrow one from. If I went on vacation and I would drive, Enterprise was your best friend,
Yeah.
Hertz, whoever, they were your best friends. And so it wasn't until I found out I was going to Germany. So that was the 2 years later in 2019. And that's when I bought my next car. So my car got totaled in 2017, didn't buy a car to the end of 2019. And here we are, 2025, and I'm still driving that car. And when I bought it, it was a 2010. So it wasn't even a 2018 or 19 or 20. I bought a almost 10-year-old car at the time, and I still have it today because I found that it was one of, your biggest expenses.
Yeah.
And, for me, it was just something meant to get me from point A to point B. And as long as it did that well, it was safe, had all the features needed.
Mm.
I don't need a TV, in my car. I don't even use the GPS system that came with the car. I never downloaded it. I never even activated it. I was like, I don't need that. I know how to use my phone because I don't want to have to update this thing or, what have you. It doesn't have sensors. Everybody's got the camera in the car. So when you back
Yeah.
up, not my car. Nope. I just look back.
You turn around the old school way, right?
That's it. I walk around, make sure there's no kids in the back kind of thing,
Mm.
So, but the thing is I'm able to take vacations like I want to, one of my most favorite vacations was Fiji. That's where I went for my 50th birthday, spent the week out there. I went to the Maldives last year. That was my big vacation for myself last year. When I was in Europe, I was out there every
Yeah.
weekend I could. And that was during COVID, no less. So, I've seen every state in the United States. That was one of my big things. A goal for myself was to visit all 50 before I turned 50. So the sacrifice and the educations, it wasn't to also deprive myself of things. It was delayed gratification.
Yeah.
And now that I'm not worried about my next job because, I had money saved up to take me at least through a year, before needing to have to go back or really wanting, to get ready to find my next job. And instead of doing that, I decided to start my own business, and so that's what I'm doing. I writing a book about it because that's how strongly I feel about it. My plan is to, as I talked earlier about restarting my podcast on finances, personal finances. And so that was my investment in me, was getting myself financially educated. And, now I can say I have multiple properties, both residential and commercial, my own business. I have stocks and bonds and, the things, my TSP, one of the best investments that I made, maxing that thing out, opening a Roth IRA, maxing that thing out until, I started making too much money and I couldn't, but that just goes to show you
Yeah.
understood. And so, but yeah, so I am all about wanting folks because I have a mindset that there's enough for all of us.
Yeah.
I don't look at it like if I tell you, then you're going to have more than what I have. And
Mm.
you might be taking from me, something I can have kind of thing. So I am all about that, and, so I know not everybody is into money and you have people, who feel that they're well off, but investing in yourself in other areas is just as important, socially, mentally. My goodness, this job, this career can be very daunting on you mentally, your mental state. Well, I talked earlier about some of those things, having bosses or coworkers who, they're not there for you. They don't want to be there to
Yeah.
support you. Physically, I talked about, hey, don't let height and weight be an issue. Don't let failing your APFT or, your weapons qualifications or what have you, be that downfall, and then of course, which is a foundation for me for so many things, my life, waking up and being grateful for it and having that opportunity to be better today than I was yesterday. So don't just, focus on that one thing. Those five things,
Oh, thanks.
I say all together work fabulously for me.
That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that because that's an area I wish a lot of us coming up in the ranks would have receiving some kind of education on it. Basic training. AIT all through your military career in terms of on the enlisted side. There's no classes and that stuff. You have to go in and get it yourself. Not trying to push the blame on anybody else. It's my own responsibility, and I'm trying to learn that as we speak today. But thanks for sharing that because I think what I took out of that really is the mindset, because sometimes we are so attractive to the material, tangible things when we need to have this compared to making those investments for the long term. I know you can sit back and really enjoy things. I appreciate you really sharing that with me. As we close to wrap up here, a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. With all the time you serve, with different areas and different places, what are some things? One or two things you would say the Army have thought you have learned from the military?
Resilience gave me a lot of practice in resilience, and I can't be more grateful for those opportunities. And I go back to my faith in, being given the foresight to see what was really there. A lot of times folks can see when bad things happen and let that
Yeah,
become, who they are and what it's all about, rather than being able to take the lesson, incorporate it into your life and make you stronger and help you move on. So that in and of itself is just amazing. The different opportunities to lead and to be led
yeah,
have just been incredible. As I mentioned, from the very, very beginning, my first unit, having that platoon sergeant and, being able to remember that and not forget that there are people behind the Army, and without them, we can't do what we do. And sometimes we think we don't need these folks. It's like, you're just whoever. I don't need you. I'm not worried about you. And, you can't do anything for me, and et cetera, et cetera. And just the very smallest of things, you would be amazed at how impactful, having that individual or those people, in your life can be. And so the friendships, oh my goodness, understanding the true definition of friendship. I mean, folks that I met when I was in college, still friends because we were ROTC
yeah.
together.
ROTC.
Yes, and still friends today. I mean, having Thanksgiving at their house, them coming to see me when we're stationed and their TDY and the location and hanging out and sharing and stories and just amazing. Men and women, and that's the thing. You have men and women. People have the idea, oh, men and women can't be friends, or, you can't have relationships with someone of the opposite sex and, oh, what have you. But when you have people who look at you at how you impact their life,
Yeah.
regardless of gender or race or strengths or weaknesses or your background or, your status, whatever it may be, that those were people who care about you and your goodness and your well-being, that those are the people you want in your life, regardless, those are the kinds of people that you want on your side at the end of the day. And so the Army afforded me an opportunity to have that perspective, to be able to be led by amazing people, people who have felt that I was amazing enough to stay in their lives even after they've left the military, whether it was retiring or, separating by other means. So just knowing that, you got that fellow warrior out there
There. So from all the
is
things that you have been exposed to, the things you've done within the military, from your experience, whilst you were a young person from New York, one of the five boroughs, join the military. Why?
and it's funny. You have to find your own why,
Yeah.
you know. A lot of times we like to share why we did it,
Hmm.
but my reason won't necessarily be your reason. And
Your
it doesn't
reason.
have to be. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be. But what I love though is I can see that I have friends. Gosh, it's scary when you think about how long you've been in. But I have friends who've had kids who've grown up to join the military and have left, or are still in themselves. And you're thinking, man, a whole nother generation of people have joined and left the Army. And for some of them, it was solely because their mom or their dad had been in, and that's why they joined. And, it's like, okay, I'm good now. I did it because my mom was in it, or I did it because my dad was in it. So, I'm good now. And that's good. I mean, that's great. I mean, I can't imagine, a parent not feeling that sense of pride and joy to know that my kid did what I did because I was that impactful on their lives, And so to take on a career that I did and, to see them flourish. I mean, heck, we got 4-star generals who've made it to that because, their dad joined the military. It was, in or what have you. And so, but yeah, you got to find your own why. You really do. For me, it really had been at the time a stepping stone. Like I said, I was going to take over Wall Street and I was just in the military to help get through college so I can come back to New York City. But I got in. There were people who believed that leaving was the wrong thing to do.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, they saw way more in me that I can contribute than I did. And then eventually I began to believe myself that I could do amazing things if I stayed. I did the work and that's what I did. And I cannot be any more grateful. I can not conceive changing my path and where I am today. And I owe that to, again, the men and women that I worked for, that I worked with, people I didn't even know who was in the background cheering me on and rooting me, to success. And so, yeah.
I appreciate it. That's amazing. As we close out here, thanks again for taking time rather to hang out with me. I really appreciate you for your service. Thanks for who you are as a person. Thanks for your leadership. I'm gonna call KB and talk trash to him, let him know we spoke. Hopefully he watched this episode. Right, I keep telling that KB, man, you guys step the game up. But I really appreciate you. So as we close here, is there anything else you'd like to share before we close out?
That believe in yourself. You know, some days it is really, really hard. You want to give up. You believe you're not the best or you're not in the right place, but you got to believe in yourself. Again, doesn't matter how small, but do that. Do that for yourself. Because I would never have believed a kid from New York City would not be working on Wall Street. Because what else did you do back in the 90s? You know what I'm saying? I mean, what else were you doing back in the 90s? It was the go-go years of, being on Wall Street. The idea that I believed that, you know what, I could go back to that if I wanted to. But this army thing, I'm gonna give it a shot. I am gonna give it my best shot. So, just believe in yourself. Don't sleep on yourself. That's what I would leave it with.
I appreciate you again. Thanks for hanging out with me. I look forward to listening to your podcast and really congratulations on everything you're doing. Congratulations on your retirement. Please, if there's anything I can do, please let me know.
I most certainly shall. And I absolutely appreciate you thinking of me that I can contribute to your next mission, if you will. And yeah, again, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me.